Do we have a quorum?
We do.
Okay, well, I call the meeting to order. Richie, would you like to go through the preamble, please?
Yes, sir. I'll do that. So in accordance with the county's continuity of government ordinance and Virginia Code section 15.2-1413, this meeting is being held electronically over the Zoom platform. The authority directors are not physically present at a single central location. Rather, they are participating electronically. The public has real-time audiovisual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone. The public is invited to comment during the meeting's public comment period. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Anyone interested in commenting should use the raise hand feature on Zoom. If you are listening by telephone, please use the *9 feature to notify the facilitator. All speakers must identify themselves and the magisterial district where they live or have a business. This meeting is being recorded and it will be made available on the county's website. And with that, I will call roll and ask each director to identify their general location. Let's see, I have the roll here. Mr. Fennell, I understand he's absent. Let's see, Mr. Taylor.
Present at my home in Albemarle County.
Sherry Buttrick. Sherry.
She's not going to be here.
Is
Well,
it
I
here?
am though, you see.
She's there. This is sneaky.
I'm in the forestry department headquarters.
Good idea.
Let's see, Dr. Moses.
North Garden here.
Mr. Emmett, David Emmett.
Present in my office in Charlottesville.
John Moore, Mr. Moore.
He wasn't coming either, but I'm not going to swear to anything.
Okay,
I
he
think
might be
he's
late.
out of town. I think he's in like Montana or somewhere.
Let's see, Rose Emery, Miss Emery.
I'm here present in Free Union, Albemarle County.
And Sharon Merrick, Miss Merrick.
Present, Ravenna District.
All right, Mr. Chair, we have a quorum and we can proceed.
Okay, glad everybody made it on these with this uncertain volatile weather pattern. And I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes, which I presume everybody has reviewed from the last meeting.
Oops, hang on, there we go. Sorry about that little hiccup there. That's not unusual. Yeah, we can go ahead and do the minutes, and then we can come back to the other matters.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make it.
We have a second.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Do we have other matters not listed on the agenda?
I haven't had anybody request any time, but anybody who is attending the meeting who has a matter that's not on the agenda can speak up or raise their hand if they do have a question.
Does anybody else have the phenomenon that it's absolutely pouring and the sun is out? And it's bright sunshine?
Yes, but I'm about 2 blocks from you.
It's bizarre.
Okay, well, if there are no matters not listed on the agenda, Scott, would you please give us an overview of the first agenda item, the Dodura donation proposal?
Thank you. Actually, before we go on to the regular items, Mr. Fennell and Mr. Gloria and I had discussed before the meeting earlier this week that there's an item of new business relating to a project underway by an easement landowner, Mr. Kendrick, who is here on the meeting. And we were hoping that the authority would consider making a motion to move new business up to this point of the meeting so that we can go ahead and go over Mr. Kendrick's proposal, or not really a proposal, but project, and so that he doesn't have to wait through all of the other proposals before we discuss his.
Do we have a motion to approve the agenda change?
So moved.
Any seconds?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's carry on.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for being flexible. Give me just a moment to get us to the right point. So again, Mr. Kendrick is here to answer any questions you might have. I will just quickly go over the basics of what is going on, and then we'll see what discussion you all would like to have. So this is the Kendrick A's easement, because Mr. Kendrick owns this farm and has since before the ACE easement went into effect. This is a 2002 ACE easement on 253 acres that are immediately west of and upstream of Chris Green Lake, which you can see there a little bit on the right of the map. Deed was recorded in 2004, and of course, as an ACE easement, it is co-held by this authority and by the county. So Mr. Kendrick has been working with the Natural Resources Conservation Service for some time to do some improvements on his farm. I've been talking with Corey Kirkland, who many of you will know from NRCS, who has been involved in this project through the Environmental Quality Incentives Program to help fund pasture improvements and erosion control measures like that on the property. As Corey explained it, the goals here are improved pasture condition and use, permanent and perennial vegetation, and some use exclusions on areas that are most vulnerable. The vulnerability is that the particular soil type on this property, while productive, is quite prone to erosion from heavy use and has been used obviously for quite some time and has suffered some erosion. So what brought this to our attention is that among all of the other things that Mr. Kendrick is doing, such as access control, fencing, weed treatments, all the things you see on the map there, he is also hoping to bring in some clean soil in various areas of the property that add up to about 50 acres to reform the land surface so that you don't have those scour gullies and things like that, so that it's less prone to being eroded and it's more productive. Let's go back to the text of the deed of easement. Under the commercial uses section, the deed does obviously permit agriculture, but also permits establishing, reestablishing, maintaining, or using fields, orchards, and pastures. Also, in the section on grading, to E, you'll notice that toward the end of it, it says common agricultural activities such as plowing, erosion control, and restoration, burial of dead animals, which is not involved here, are not activities that materially alter the topography of the property. This means that they are not subject to the prohibition earlier in that paragraph. They're an expected part of the agricultural management of the land. So the NRCS project has been underway for some time. However, again, this came to our attention because due to a recent zoning change, there was a special exception request filed by Mr. Kendrick because any fill area in the rural areas of more than 2 acres requires a special exception. And so that process, the zoning process, which is separate from any easement considerations, is underway now. We believe that the NRCS plan and Mr. Kendrick's proposed improvements for the farm are consistent with what is permitted under the easement. However, because of the size of the project, the extent of it, we wanted to make sure that we communicated this with the authority. There is no particular approval that's needed here. It does not need approval in advance to do this work, unlike as he might for certain kinds of forestry under some of our other easements, many other things that require prior approval. This doesn't. This would just be something that would be permitted. But if it was done incorrectly, or if something that wasn't permitted was done later, then we have an enforcement situation. I don't see any reason to believe that we will have an enforcement situation. This seems appropriate to me, but I think it would be worthwhile to let the authority discuss this, give any feedback they have, raise any concerns, and y'all could either just leave it at that, or you could make a finding that you find no conflict with the easement or something like that, which I think would offer some reassurance to the landowner. So I will leave it at that. Again, Mr. Kendrick is here to answer the questions you might have, and I can as well. So thank you.
Are there any questions or discussion?
I have a question. Where is the fill coming from? Or do we
So
know that?
So to be honest, I can't say with 100% certainty where the fill is coming from, but I will tell you the predominant location of most of the clean earth fill right now seems to be coming off of construction sites located with the UVA projects. This project has been delayed about 12 months as I go through this process. I missed out on 3 major projects that would have included some clean earth fill from UVA, but it would have also included all the topsoil that was removed from where the new sheets is being built at the intersection of 29 and Prophet Road. So it's basically project permitting as to where the clean earth fill is coming from, but it is not inert waste. It is clean earth fill, which is defined by the county as dirt that can be dug, plowed, or planted.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. This is not waste fill. And when we say it's related to a construction project, it's because it's soil that's being removed from sites that will then be developed. It is not construction waste or anything like that. It's just soil that's being graded off of sites from later development.
And all of this is pursuant to an NRCS plan?
Yes, ma'am. It's all a part of an EQIP project that started in 2018 with the USDA and NRCS. And Scott actually has information from the NRCS that outlines the project.
I do. I've got a detailed couple of messages and some attachments from Corey Kirkland.
Mr. Kendrick, is this land currently under cultivation?
It is not under cultivation, nor do I plan to cultivate it. What I'm trying to do is, so this land has been in my family since 1737. I'm actually the 10th generation to live on it. And if you look to the left-hand side of this picture here, where you can see the clear-cut area, that at one point in time was pasture land. And that's what I'm trying to reintroduce it back into. It would be foolhardy to try to put it into crops or anything like that, because the erosion capabilities that would occur there by plowing. I don't want to do that at all. I want to turn it into pasture land so it gets good solid vegetation on it to prevent any further erosion occurring, and place it into a rotational grazing system for the cattle on the farm, again, as an erosion control.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hey,
And-
Richie, are you, your opinion is that this is consistent with the terms of the easement?
So as of now, yes. And that's why I wanted Mr. Kendrick to be invited to address this, because I was not aware of the details. We didn't have the details. And then certainly down the road, if we didn't have the details that he's sharing today, and we were to see significant fill being brought into the property, we would have been in a position, as Scott indicated, someone would have pushed us towards some form of enforcement. So we thought this would be more convenient for all parties involved.
But just in terms of what the deed says, you feel that this is not a violation of the easement?
I think it's I think it's agricultural use.
Okay, it's a little hard to see all the language here because there are people's pictures in the middle of it.
Okay.
You know,
Well, doesn't it, I mean, you've got erosion control and restoration. Doesn't that
Yeah,
cover
and
it?
also it allows conversion to crop or pasture land. So I do think that's appropriate. I had been advised that in terms of if fill is appropriate, it can go as high as 6 feet. And again, that's why I think the details matter. You know, I'm not hearing Mr. Kendrick to indicate that he's looking to bring in that much fill, but anyway, that's why he was invited.
Well, it doesn't sound to me like we need to opine further, Richie, if this is consistent with the terms of the easement. Nor do we need a motion to approve, is from where I sit.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that's necessary. I think it's appropriate for Mr. Kendrick in terms of our minutes. If the authority doesn't have concerns based upon the plan that's presented, then he of course has some assurance that that's been brought up and discussed in the minutes. I didn't want him also to be in a position if he's doing this, but still we start receiving complaints, whether they're zoning complaints or complaints made to the directors from adjacent landowners, or even, I guess you could have people on Chris Green Lake bringing it up, you know, a year down the road. And so then we have to essentially get into Mr. Kendrick's business and do this again, but he has to stop what he's doing or involve some legal proceedings. It just seems this was the more prudent way to go.
Well, thank you for the heads up. Mr. Kendrick, best of luck with the project. It sounds like a worthy one and a relatively extensive one, and we'll be keeping an eye out for the final results. So best of luck with that.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Tim. That was really helpful.
Okay, well, I think we're ready to move on to the first easement. Scott, if you would like to take over from here, please.
Thank you very much. Back to where we were. All right, so we have 2 donation proposals and then a third that is just an initial discussion of a proposal. The first is the Dodera, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, donation proposal, which is just about 80 acres on Markwood Road, parcel 1837. And just look at the usual table. All the answers are yes, where necessary as far as compliance with our policies. There are 6 potential dwellings to be eliminated on this property, but I put an asterisk there. And the reason I did that, and I'll show you on the map in just a moment, while this property has the total potential to develop 8 dwellings under the current regulations, and there are 2 there now, the access is limited. There is no direct public or private road frontage on this property. It has access easements varying between 20 and 25 feet in width, which are not wide enough to create driveways or roads for full development of the property. Now, of course, at any point in the future, this landowner or another could acquire such access and open up a lot more development potential. But I just wanted to make sure that you all understood that at the moment, the access is quite limited. And here's the map, and you can see why. Here's Markwood Road at the bottom left of the map. And this gray driveway here is that 20 to 25 foot access, which is roughly in the order of 1,200, 1,500 feet long. So 2 or 3 dwellings are really all that's going to happen with that access. But in the very long term, if the rules change, or if another landowner were to acquire deeded access, you can open all of that up. I should have mentioned we're northwest of Earlysville here. And here's the location of the main dwelling. There's a very small secondary dwelling. There's farm structures. So let's see here. Resources to be protected on the property. The property is in the watershed of the North Fork Ravenna River public water intake. It does have over 50 acres of prime or locally important soils. And it meets, we often try to measure out the number of feet shared with other easements. This property meets another easement at a point. So it'd be 0 feet, but it is contiguous. The proposed terms, no subdivisions. The existing dwellings are allowed to stay with slight increases in permitted sizes. And there is a 35-foot riparian protection area on the identified streams, which would be this main stream running through the property. So other than the access issue, this is a fairly simple and straightforward proposal. Staff would recommend the authority accept it. Of course, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
County allow it to be divided?
I'm sorry, Sherry, what was that?
Would the county allow the property to be divided even once?
Honestly, blanking at the moment whether or not the street frontage requirements apply to 21-acre lots. And I don't remember off the top of my head. I think that would be the main impediment.
25-foot right of way wasn't enough for any division, and it probably doesn't matter to us, but we should be sure the landowner knows that answer for himself, or herself.
I can check into that in more detail.
I mean,
Because I'm kind of looking at this in the long term, that those access rules could change, or they could purchase a little bit of land and change the entire rules of the game here.
I mean, does the landowner have a keen sense of getting an appraisal before she gets too deep into doing an easement, lest she find out to be worth 0?
I can certainly discuss that with her. She doesn't seem to be in a rush to sign her life away on this. We've been at this for a while now, so I'd be happy to, I think if you all were inclined to accept it, then I would be happy to go back to her and say, yes, they've accepted it, but let's talk about your appraisal issues before you hire an attorney to draft the deed for you.
Yeah, I
Seems
mean, I
reasonable.
don't think you have to be involved in the discussion. In fact, probably shouldn't be, but it would
I'd
certainly
encourage her
be
to have that discussion.
a kindness to her to say
Yeah.
that, I mean, for $500, she can go get a preliminary appraisal. And before she does something that she then wants to get out of, and this comes to us to say, how do I get out of this easement?
Right.
She should be sure that she's happy with whatever the tax implications are. Other than that,
That's a very good point, and I need to follow up and refresh my memory of that part of the subdivision ordinance, which is obviously gone out of my head.
So, Scott, it seems to me we need to know, based on its current configuration, exactly what the contribution is to conservation, meaning what division rights are they giving up in its current form or not. To me, that's sort of the primary basis for saying yes or no. And it doesn't sound to me like we know the answer to that question based on.
Well,
current
there's two answers. There's a theoretical answer, which is the property has 5 small lot development rights and enough total acreage to
Right.
add those 5 to 3 more 21-acre lots, so 8. You're correct that we don't have the final answer on what could be done without improving that access. If you prefer that we come back with more information about that, we can do that.
I guess I'm
Well, I
more
think
worried
we
about
do
the
need
that
landowner than
information.
her, than us.
I'm just interested to hear that, and I'm happy to do that. It's an easy, I say it's an easy question because I work with people who know, and I don't. But I'd be interested to hear that if the answer comes back that no further divisions are possible or no further dwellings are possible under current regulations, what does that lead the authority to think? Are you still interested because of the potential for future access changes? Or do you feel that you're only interested in the analysis of the current potential?
Any thoughts?
I would just say I would be interested in the current potential, not what could happen in the future.
Well, I can come back with more detailed information on that next month, and you all can decide how you want to follow up from there. If that's how you'd like to approach it, I'm happy to do that.
I
Scott,
agree
I
with
think
Karen.
that's a good idea. We've been confronted with this in the context of ACE easements. And I know in terms of, I like the idea of a preliminary appraisal, but in the context, from what I understood is, even though there may not be that access, in making a determination of division rights and developments, that community development will look at the possibility of the landowner being able to purchase a bigger or wider easement. I'm looking right now at the deed, and it appears that she has a 12.5-foot width easement. But they do consider the possibility that one could be greater access could be purchased or obtained down the road.
I think at the point where it's 12.5, it's 12.5 on one side and 12.5 on the other. So that's actually the 25
So is it
section.
25? Okay.
So just to help me in my discussions with the landowner, no need for a motion or anything on this, but I'm just curious if this access issue were not here, does the authority generally feel otherwise that this is an acceptable proposal?
Want to go back to the conservation values for a minute so we can see what the reasons for doing this are?
And I thought it was a worthwhile proposal, but I'd like to make sure I'm accurately representing what the authority thinks when I'm discussing this with the landowner.
In the world where conservation easements are getting increased scrutiny, both from the public and from the supervisors, et cetera, I think we need to be really clear on what the conservation values we're asking for in exchange for land use, taxation, et cetera. And again, to my way of thinking, if this were did have road frontage and there were no restrictions on development, it would be pretty clear. But absent that, I think we really need to know what in fact all of the conservation values are before we act as fiduciaries, so to speak, for the county in accepting this easement, my opinion. Do we have a consensus?
What concerns me the most would be if the county determines that there's no ability to divide the property and or to build a second house. If the appraisal does not then reflect either zero value or a very small value, that would concern me because those two things don't seem to jive.
Right.
If she wanted to do it without an appraisal, just because she wanted to do conservation, that would not concern me in the slightest.
It's usually not that simple. Okay, well, thank you all for the feedback. I will get back with Ms. Todora and look into this in more detail and try to get you some more detailed information next month.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. All right. The next item will look familiar. It's the Guff donation proposal. Same family that we had a proposal from 1 year ago or 2 years ago, and on an adjacent property. They have acquired an adjacent property next to the farm that they previously put under easement with us. This property is smaller. It's 23 acres over 2 parcels and has one dwelling currently. Because it's 2 parcels, it has quite a bit of development potential for its size, so up to 7 dwellings being eliminated. And so you can see in green here to the top left is across the Easement Road. And Sherry, you'll remember Old Woodville, is it? Is that the right name?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
The Van Cleef, the old Van Cleef place.
Right.
So
And
that's
I
what's
suppose-
across Esmont Road?
Right.
Okay.
And interestingly, I believe this property that we're looking at, 25B and 25C, used to belong to George St. John. But
Oh.
it now belongs to the same family as Old Woodville. So they also wanted to do an easement on this one.
So is this where Mr. St. John used to live?
I think so, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I've been there then.
Alrighty, so conservation values, a portion of 25C, which is that eastern still wooded parcel, is in the watershed of Tudor Creek Reservoir. So it helped to protect that water supply. Property shares about 500 feet of boundary with an existing easement. And the property is located in the Southern Albemarle Rural Historic District. And
Yeah, I mean, Old Woodville is important as a historic house, I believe.
right, and there
It's on the
were,
register?
I believe it is, and actually we added some terms on that one. Apologize for unsharing. I've got to pull up another document. One of my slides went astray, so give me just a moment here. Show you the proposed terms of this easement. Apologize for the delay here. I feel like I should have hold music when this happens. Alrighty, and here are the proposed terms. No subdivisions, the 2 parcels to be conveyed as a single property. The existing house or its replacement would be permitted. That would be the only permitted dwelling. Accessory structures and farm buildings will be limited to 1,500 square feet, generally due to the small size of the property. No clearing for
Scott, would
agriculture
that be 1,500 square feet aggregate or per building?
per building.
Okay.
Yeah, you could run out of square feet really quickly. That was a total. So no clearing for agriculture on 25C, that's to remain wooded. There were no streams to buffer in this case, so to propose that. So staff would recommend that the authority accept this proposal. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Suppose you wanted to clear for something else. Why agriculture?
Well, good point. That's my phrasing. It's at fault there. You see under forestry uses, it says parcel 25C to remain forested. I think that's the way we would actually word the deed when it came to it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we should single out agriculture in case
No,
somebody wants
you're
to have a
right.
bowling
That
alley.
I was just thinking ahead to sort of double booking on the restrictions, just to be painfully clear in the deed. But certainly the forestry section would specify that.
Yeah, I mean, somebody made it clear to do something totally else, but equally undesirable.
Scott, can you
clarify
go
that.
back to the map, please?
Sure. Apologize for the delay.
So all the land, I believe that's the old Nidri land in green. That's all in conservation easement. Is that correct?
That's Old Woodville across the street there. That's under an easement that this body accepted a couple of years ago.
Right. Okay. And that area, again, I'm going from memory here, but we've accepted quite a number of easements in that immediate Easement area over the last several years. So that's becoming a relatively densely eased part of the county. Is that a fair statement?
That is true. VOF has quite a few down there. We have a few, including Easement Farm itself. And this would just add on to that.
Any thoughts from the rest of the body?
Would seem straightforward.
Seems
Yeah,
straightforward.
I have
for
two
it, I
questions.
think.
Scott, where does the 7 potential dwellings eliminated on the 2 parcels, how does that add up?
Each of these parcels has 5 unused development rights. Well, one of them has 4 because there's a dwelling there, but just the way the sizes work out, if I remember correctly, there were 5 possible on 25B and only 3 possible on 25C. So that was where the 8 came from. Or it was 4 and 3. Sorry, I was thinking of the other one. So that's 7.
Huh.
So they were both existing parcels when the development rights were allocated in 1980. So they each have their own. Obviously, 25C is too small to use all 5. It was either 2 or 3 that were possible on that one.
Okay, all right. And then on the map, it looks like 25C has access off Porter's Road, but then they run the drive so that you can go all the way through to Easement. Is that how that works?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Do we have a motion to accept the easement as proposed?
I will
I'll
make
a
it,
motion.
and I'll second.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
This is Sherry.
Chip,
Chip second.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Uh,
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. That's very encouraging, and hopefully we'll see many more of those in that area.
So thank you. All right, so our last regular item of business tonight is about a proposal that is underway and not complete. I can't see the attendee list, but I know that Ms. Tori Kennedy from Conservation Partners was going to be here to help us through this discussion. She's her company is working with the landowners to help
She's
them
here,
with their-
Scott. I'm just waiting for her to
Great.
accept she's just been promoted to a panelist.
Great, thank you. So I'll just do a brief presentation and go over what it is that we're trying to get clarity on. This is not a request for the authority to act tonight. This is just a discussion item. And the plan would be that Tori and I would get your feedback and go away and work with the landowner to refine it further if you all are interested. So very briefly, this is the Truxell property, a little over 420 acres. It's on Dyer's Mill Lane, which is on Route 20 South. You all accepted an easement 4 or 5 years ago adjacent to this. The Sandberg family, I believe it was. This meets all the basic acceptance criteria. The proposal would eliminate approximately 18 potential dwellings. And here's the map. Just to orient you a bit, here's Route 20, Scottsville Road over here. This is the Sandberg easement from a few years ago. There are 2 parcels here. The smaller one is the parcel around what was once the historic house, which very unfortunately burned down several years ago. But there are some other historic structures still remaining. The majority of the development potential is coming from this larger farm parcel that surrounds that The property meets several of the acceptance criteria. There's floodplain. There are wetlands in the floodplain. The property is in the watershed of the Tudor Creek Reservoir, which is a public water supply, obviously. Nearly the entire property has prime or locally important soils for agriculture. It has 430 feet of frontage on Route 20, which is a Virginia byway, and an entrance corridor. Large boundary of the adjacent easement properties and in the rural historic district. So, as you might expect for a proposal in this location, it meets many of the acceptance criteria. This is a rough draft of the proposed terms. The deed would allow the 420 acres to be divided into 3 ownerships. It's currently in a single ownership with 2 parcels. A total of 6 dwelling units would be permitted across the 420 acres. Those include the existing house, which was built to replace the unfortunately lost historic home, 1 remaining historic home on that same small parcel, and 4 new dwellings. We are working through some historic preservation terms. We don't have those totally tied down yet, but we've made good progress. And I'll just jump in for a second. There are 50-foot buffers proposed on the perennial portions of Tudor Creek and 35 elsewhere. However, the issue that Ms. Kennedy and I wanted to talk with you all about tonight is that this landowner is proposing to do commercial poultry raising on this property, something we don't see very often in Albemarle, and this body has not had to deal with before. I have not. Those 2 poultry houses would be up to about 40,000 square feet, which of course is much larger than any structure we've seen proposed on an easement proposal. But on the other hand, they are farm buildings. So there's a question there to be wrestled with of, is the authority willing to accept larger structures when they are clearly for an agricultural purpose, especially on a large property like this? And this is not a horribly useful slide, but just so we're all looking at the same thing. An example here from another state of commercial poultry houses, because I didn't find a good picture of any from over in the valley. And just to mention from some of the research I did, an article from about 5 years ago from Delaware talking about how these larger poultry houses are becoming standard in the industry. So it's an issue that we may find ourselves having to deal with again. Thought it would be helpful to have a discussion about this and see what questions it raised for you all. Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, Ms. Kennedy did forward to me, and I shared with you in the memo some language from a VOF easement that was recorded over in Augusta County that permitted structures like this by size and by a specific limited number, and gave them an envelope in which they could be located and not elsewhere on the property. That's all I had for now.
Could I ask, what's disturbing to me is what happens to the effluviant that comes out? I mean, there's going to be a lot of waste that comes out of these structures from the chickens. And I'm wondering what happens to that if it's in the Tudor Creek water district. I'm wondering, is that going to be a problem?
I've done a little bit of research into that because I had the same concern. And I've gotten partway through the DEQ program descriptions and regs. My impression is, and I'm happy to come back later with more information on this, my impression is that typically the waste is not distributed on site. It's used as fertilizer elsewhere, exported from the site. I will say that DEQ has very specific and detailed regulations for every aspect of these operations. So I shared that concern about the waste possibly being more of a problem than the buildings themselves. But from what I've seen so far, there is a very detailed and active DEQ regulation program for that aspect of the use.
Well, if you're saying that the waste is used somewhere else, are they going to cart it somewhere else in trucks?
Yes.
Or is it going to be put somewhere else on the 450-acre farm?
I think typically it's trucked elsewhere entirely for fertilizer uses and things like that.
But we don't know where, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it could be anywhere.
Rose, that's relatively typical to use chicken litter as fertilizer and.
Yeah, I knew that. I just wondered if with the mass amount, Peter, that would be coming out of there, you couldn't just put it on that farm.
No, you're right. You're right.
Can
So
can I jump in for just a second? Sorry, this is Tori Kennedy. Just so you all know too, the county he already submitted his permits to the county and it's already gone through the approval process. And they are requiring a stormwater easement. So there is extra protections in there to protect the watershed that's on the property.
So I have a
You say-
question. Yep, go ahead, please.
Scott, several questions. Is this being brought to the authority by Conservation Partners, a third party, or by the landowners?
Well, Conservation Partners is representing, they work for the landowner. Their job is to help him through the easement process.
Representing in the legal sense or representing in the process sense?
They're consultants, not attorneys, as far as I know.
They're basically tax credit brokers, Chip.
they're
The second-
basically what?
They're tax credit brokers primarily.
Well, that was my next question. Leaving aside the chicken operation, which raises a number of environmental questions, what about the subdivision here? We've typically not allowed properties to be subdivided.
Well, what we're permitting would be 3 separate ownerships on 420 acres. So those are actually quite large. It's pretty consistent with the large divisions we have done on easements like Morven East, like Justice. It's not unusual to allow a property of this size to be carved into 2 or 3 separate ownerships at some point.
Well, I think that at minimum, if we're going to permit it, this is not Morven East or Justice. This is 1/10 the size of those.
Yes.
We would need to have, at least I would advocate that we have a very specific plan for where the subdivisions would occur, the building envelopes or general vicinities for where the dwellings would be, and most importantly, the siting of these chicken sheds. Without knowing where everything would fit, it would be very difficult to judge the conservation value of this property, other than just purely eliminating division rights, which we've said repeatedly is not sufficient criteria.
And just to follow on with that, to my way of thinking, this is unusual because we're asking about chicken houses, but if this were an indoor riding arena, we would ask for citing questions as well. So I think Dr. Moses is right on target that the adjacent lands that are under easement are going to be dramatically affected by this, and the location and envelopes are of critical importance.
That's a good point about the riding rings. We did have Guthrie Hall requirement that the new, I think it was 15,000 square foot riding ring be within a large building envelope that was centered around the main house.
To put this a different way, I think we need to see, before we can act, a full plan for where everything would be sited, their size and relationship to one another, and where the subdivisions would occur.
Well, that is actually going to be available because he's breaking ground on them very soon since he got the permit from the county. And they're going to be, just so you have an idea, Scott, if you want to take it back to the map, I can tell you exactly where they're going. I've been out to the property, I've walked it. And if you look at where that smaller parcel is, they're going right next to up in that upper field along the boundary.
I don't know
they're
if you all
going
can
to
see
be-
my pointer or not, but
Yep.
Yeah,
What is the they?
the 2 poultry houses. So they will.
I hadn't realized they were that
very
far along.
close. They will be very close to the rest of the farmstead that's there. They will not be out in the middle of the rest of the property. They're all going to be kind of in that larger building area of.
When you say all, I thought there were only 2.
Yeah, the two poultry houses along with all the
Okay.
other existing structures that are on
Okay.
the property already. The dwellings, the reason why there's so many divisions and dwellings requested is because this is a young farmer from Pennsylvania, and he's got 4 young children, and they all help him with his farming operations, and he just wanted to be able to give them parts of the farm if they wanted to continue farming in the future.
But if this came to us, notwithstanding any chicken houses, which again is a little bit of an unusual twist, but an agricultural purpose nonetheless, but we would still ask where, and the IRS, I think, would ask where the building envelopes are going to be for the, future houses. So to me, that's a important part of the question that needs to be answered.
Yeah, I
And again,
can't
I
see you can't possibly do this with those scale of buildings unless you have building envelopes, or you run the risk of some real tax problems, as Tori well knows.
Yeah.
I'd also like to know how it would be divided into, if it can be divided into 2 or 3 parcels, because there's nothing really to stop them from having 2 small parcels with 2 houses on each one and selling those off.
But I'm not sure that matters, Rose, does it?
Well, I don't know.
I mean, insofar as one parcel is small, the other parcels become bigger.
Well, that's true.
Yeah,
I
it's
just-
the same thing we got into with justice was, the question of the parcel sizes. And the same thing came up that, if they choose to
Yeah, I
make a
just
couple of
don't
them
like
small,
that
then
big bag in the east. I don't like that.
I think that, these easements are forever, and, generation after generation, they may not want, and for conservation, it may not matter where the divisions are. It really matters where the bloody chicken houses are. I would only say that because there's so much, I just ran the numbers, it's 0.5%, it's way over 0.25%, and probably more than 0.5%. So, it's quite a bit of building, and so it's a little bit too bad that it's 3 parcels instead of 2. But I think you've got to have envelopes. But I really think that going forward into the future, that it's equivalent. If somebody does 2 3-acre lots and then they have 400 acres undivided, that is equivalent in its virtue to having, and maybe better than having 350-acre lots.
So Scott, just a clarification on the chicken houses, 2 poultry houses up to 40,000. Is that 40,000 total or 40,000 each?
I believe it's 40,000 each. That's getting to be a fairly
40,000
typical.
It's 40,000 each? I thought it was
Yes.
a total.
I thought it was total. Are you sure it's?
God forbid.
Well, they're usually about 45,000 square feet big. And I think that slide you showed talked about being 600 feet long, which produces that result.
They're essentially, if you look at it from an acreage size, one poultry house is essentially 1 acre.
Interesting.
Are very, very large. Well, it sounds like we have some feedback so far about wanting building locations, building envelope locations, possibly division plans. Is there anything else that you all would like to see? I admit I had not realized that they were on the verge of constructing these things. It changes the picture a little bit, but on the other hand, it ties down where things are going to be. So I can work with Tori to get more information on those stormwater restrictions that are being required by the county. Is there anything else that you all would like to see before
I
talking
think-
about this again?
Scott, I think we need to know what runoff provisions there are that may be included in the stormwater plan, but if this effluent gets into the water supply for Scottsville, it would be certainly not consistent with the conservation purpose.
So you'd like to have some more details on the applicable
Yeah.
waste management requirements from DEQ.
That's right. Recognizing that at least in places where this kind of commercial agriculture is typical in Eastern Shore of Maryland, for instance, and Delaware, that is a big issue for the Chesapeake Bay. It's one of the areas that has received a lot of attention in protection of the bay. There's
Yeah, I'll be
another
happy to
consideration
provide.
too, which is inherently difficult for us to deal with. This is an area that has water problems. It's been very difficult to get well water in southern Albemarle County. And these are water intensive types of agriculture. It's not like cattle grazing. So that I don't know how we deal with that, but it's really a consideration. It's more for zoning and for whatever permits required from the county than it would be for us, but it's something that we may need to be mindful of.
I've added that to my list.
If there's a defined location, Scott, I think it would be good for the staff to look at the defined location on the property and assess whether you think from a water quality standpoint, that's a viable location.
I think that's a potential problem.
So I'm all for agricultural endeavors. But again, I keep thinking if someone came to us with a horse facility with all the bells and whistles that was 80,000 square feet, what would we say? That's a huge building.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's a huge building.
And as Sherry said, it's over the usual thumbnail benchmark we use for the amount of enclosed space.
Well, I'm just using the VOF uses 0.25%, but on farmland, they will go larger. So I just ran it to get a gauge on it for myself. So it's about 0.5% of the property is about 90,000, I think. So by the time you add in even a couple of houses, you probably have to permit 100,000 square feet. I do suggest that if you're going to borrow the old VOF Valley language that might have been used, I think our preference these days is not to be that specific except as to location.
You mean not as specific regarding size?
I mean, now we have an aggregate total square footage beyond which there is no ability for approval, full stop. But it doesn't say what the buildings, I think it does say that for buildings of 10,000 square feet or greater, they require approval.
Well, I mean, that may be kind of moot here if the truck cells are actually about to start building these things. They may be already in place, or at least the foundations may be in before we complete this process. So, but on the other hand, that helps us tie down the envelopes and inform you all as whether or not this is something you want to follow up with.
I think we would want to have some say on any change of use as well as part of a theoretical proposal to take this.
I'm not sure what the usual industry practice is for, I know for solar facilities, which seem totally different, but the expectation is that when they're out of use, they are removed. I don't know if that's ever applied for poultry houses or not. I haven't thought about it till now.
It's a very difficult provision. We've had it for cell towers, and it doesn't happen. People won't do it, and then they sue you.
It's a danger.
I mean, you could probably, have a provision that has an approval for a change other than agriculture, perhaps, or other than maybe even the current thing, if you want that. I mean, you maybe don't want it to turn into, what could it be, a data center, I suppose.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't care. I don't know.
Self-storage, I don't know. I just,
Well, and that's already prohibited through the commercial terms.
right, I understand. It just,
Or 40,000 each.
so
20,000.
it sounds like at a minimum that in order to make a decision on this easement, we would need clear definition of potential boundary line adjustments, number one, clear definition of building envelopes potentially for additional houses and for these agricultural structures which are being built as we speak. And if I'm not missing anything, that would be those would be the items we would request to see in a follow-up discussion on the worthiness of taking this as a conservation easement. Is that a fair summation?
I also had waste management information and water demand information on my list.
And 2 buildings of technically then.
So if we just go back to the first chart that even had this piece of property meet our requirements for conservation, forget the chicken houses. It sounded pretty strong. I mean,
It certainly is a sizable property that meets several of the authority's acceptance criteria.
yeah.
Is this actually in the Easement Rural Historic District or just outside? Do we know?
Let me see. It's in the Southern Albemarle Rural Historic District.
Okay.
So yeah, as I said, we weren't asking you all for an action tonight. We just wanted guidance on issues to follow up on. We've got several of those now. I think that's probably enough to go on unless any of you have anything to add.
Any further discussion? All right. Thank you, Scott.
And just wanted to say thanks to Tori for coming along to help out. I appreciate it. We already did new business. I guess we can check to see if there's any other new business before we go on to old. I have a couple of items of old business.
If there's no new business, Scott, take it away.
And I'm sorry, I may have stepped on Richie there. He may have something as well. 2 things under old business. One is that after a serious reorganization of the county's HR department, I have restarted the process of trying to get a monitoring position. I should say more like an internship position than anything permanent, just a wage job, but I'm working through the process of getting that listed soon. And just before this meeting started, got some feedback from HR. So I hope that means we're finally making some progress toward getting people out in the field doing the monitoring we should be doing. And I will update you all about that by next month's meeting, I hope. Second, actually I have 3 things. Second, Dr. Moses had asked meeting before last for an update on the junk car problem at the easement that we co-held with VOF out near Crozet. The cars are gone thanks to hard work by our zoning enforcement team and Jillian Boone especially. There are 2 cars left as permitted under zoning as basically hobby cars, 2 non-functional vehicles that are undercovers, but the large collection of junk and non-functional vehicles is now gone.
Great.
So especially thanks to Jillian Boone for all of her months of hard work on that one. Finally, although there wasn't time to schedule it for today, I wanted to mention to you all, you'll remember that recently you saw a proposal for the music hall property, and the most recent version of that was for an 11,500 square foot main house and the 2 accessory houses to be 4,500 square feet. Too close to this meeting happening for me to be able to add it to the agenda. I got a message from the landowner, his attorney again, saying they've revised that proposal to be the main house at 11,500 square feet and the accessory houses at 2,000 square feet. However, just due to the timer, we're going to put that on next month's agenda. We weren't able to do that for today. That's all I had for now.
And I just, I guess this is really, really old business because I bring it up every year. I just saw the list, I think yesterday or the day before, from Virginia Land Conservation Foundation, indicating that the county authority was going to get, I believe it's $89,000 from the tax department for the monitoring. And it's my custom to ask that, 10, 20, 30,000 of that dollar, whatever, of that amount be put into a legal defense fund. This is partly in deference to the debacle at Turner Mountain a few years ago, not so many years ago that some of us have forgotten it. I was glad to see the county attorney responsible for it retiring. So I would like to suggest that we have some action or a proposal on transferring some of that money to a legal defense fund and to bird dog that money to make sure that it doesn't just drop away into the county general fund as did happen initially.
Right, and I had not seen the VLCF list yet, and I think Richie and I could probably bring that back next month for you all to make a motion on a specific number. Just to reassure you all, the authority and the county have a formal agreement for the county to act as the authority's fiscal agent. The authority's money,
No.
the authority's funds are in separate accounts that are held and managed by the county, but that are not subject to being just disappeared into the general fund. So we can also try to bring you an update on what
in bringing that to pass 4 or 5 years ago, which is a big improvement. Right. Also, Scott, just FYI, there's $2.4 million this year in the farmland category and more money in the other categories for VLCF projects. And, that ACE project that was slightly languishing without enough county money, someone might apply before September 6th, potentially.
Good point. Thank you.
Not that I want you competing against things that I'm going to put forward, but never mind. But it is out there, and it might be prudent for you to look into it.
I will raise that issue tomorrow to see if we can jump on that. I can't promise it myself because I'm not that far up the totem pole, but I'll be glad to raise it.
Sherry, in your inflationary, in these inflationary days, you've lowered your request. Wasn't it 50% of our yearly allocation that you suggested previously?
89,000 is a lot.
Yeah, that's supposed to be the biggest we've ever gotten, I think. That's huge.
I'm happy to take as much as you think we can get, Chip.
Well, I would propose that we allocate 50% of the current amount to the legal defense fund.
I mean, what we found before was that when we have to take action on our own without the county or sometimes in opposition to the county, which is what happened on Turner Mountain, legal fees mount up quickly. The county won't defend us, and that can be a deterrent for taking, good enforcement action. And I'm just trying to assure that that does not happen again.
I would just recommend that maybe we hold off an action until next month so that Richie and I can bring back a more current report on what you already have in the regular funds and the dedicated defense funds, so you can make a more informed decision about how much you want to move over.
No, that's
Fine
great.
idea.
If you look up on the VLCF website, you'll under, or maybe it's Department of Conservation under VLCF, you can find the current agenda for the meeting that was 2 days ago, and that has all the allocations for all the
Okay.
recipients, including the county.
I saw
We
that
got
posted. I
exactly
didn't
the
have time to
same as
read it.
Fauquier.
I would point out that a large amount of property that we hold easements on is going to hit the market in the next 3 or 4 months, and it wouldn't be imprudent to have funds for a rainy day should we need it.
You talking about
Speaking of
the
which,
auction?
the justice auction, for any of you who haven't heard, the 4,500 acre justice property that we have under easement is being put up for auction into the 5 permitted pieces. So everything seems to be in compliance with the terms of the easement, but it'll be interesting to see if we maybe get some local landowners who will actually be around for us to work with.
I think it would be wise for the county authority staff to be pretty present when it comes to that whole, A, the advertising and discussion, and B, the actual auction. I remember when something was auctioned in Orange County, I went, and it was a good thing to go. Because you want to make absolutely sure that whoever is bidding on it is well aware of all the terms of the easement.
Yeah, I will say, and Richie noted this, that in the auction brochures, they're actually making reference to the easement. So
They had a
that's at
link
least
to
step.
they had a link to the actual deed, but I didn't click on it and follow it, so I can't testify as to where it takes you. It just says that it has the conservation easement deed, and if you click on it, it'll take you there.
Yeah.
That
But I
initial
think,
auction is.
I would
coming
just listen
quickly.
up to the discussion and make sure that you all feel that everybody's well aware of it, that when the auctioneer auctions it, that they mention it, that there's somebody there to explain it if need be. Because it can go wrong really quickly.
Scott, and if I recall correctly, the advertisement also mentioned the assignment of development rights.
Well, that's good.
So I think it was 2 per parcel.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sherry. I thought that was, I was impressed because I expected those items would not have been included in the notice, but it was.
Well, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
One other item just to bring to everyone's attention, if they haven't seen it already, is the Board of Supervisors have asked and the county appraiser to analyze the impact of the conservation easements and land use taxation on state transfer payments for education. And Peter Lynch has done a lengthy review that shows the benefit of easements for tax payments from the state. And so that has been circulated recently among the Board of Supervisors. Scott, I'm sure you've got a copy of that, or you might make it
Yeah,
available.
he was the one who sent it to me when I sent it to you.
I'm
Any
just sorry,
other
just
old-
making a note to send it out.
I have
Any
one.
other old business?
I have one item. So I saved the worst for last. I've circulated to everyone by email a draft remote participation policy. And so that's I would ask you to take a look at that. It's going to come up in August for discussion, consideration, and hopefully adoption. But certainly if there's any questions in the meantime, I'll be happy to answer those on an individual basis. In essence, what we're looking at is a remote electronic participation policy that would allow individual members to participate electronically if they have personal medical issues or with their family. And also if they're involved in some type of, if they have a personal reason, could be a family event, could be a business travel. That's not a substitute for in-person meetings, in the sense that in order to take advantage of that, there will have to be a quorum physically assembled at the building. The county anticipates that we'll be back meeting in person in September. And so that's why we want to get this adopted in August, and then it'll be effective September 1st. The second part is the option to conduct all virtual meetings. And that's essentially what we've been doing for the past 2 years. And I can't say off the top of my head if the county will support this authority in doing that. But I still think it's important to have that option. It's very limited in its use, although I think a lot of localities would like to have that option. The General Assembly didn't give it to us. So my recommendation is that we only adopt it for special meetings. And I think there are some times when we have special meetings, and it'd be nice if we could call them quickly and do it electronically. We're extremely limited in how many all virtual meetings we can hold during the course of the year, and you can't do them consecutively. So that's why it's very difficult to say we're going to pick a regular meeting and call it an all virtual meeting, because if a special meeting comes up and we have to make it all virtual, then we have to change gears. So it's not a very, it's a good option to have. I don't think it will be used in a widespread fashion, but I'd ask you just take a look at that. If you have questions, just shoot me an email. I'll answer them the best I can. But just be prepared to consider it and adopt it in August. Final point is, it's not required that it be adopted. I know of one body that, because of the size of it, they're not in favor of having remote electronic participation, and they're not in favor of having all virtual meetings. It just is too burdensome to be done. But I think this group has proven that it can be done, and it can be done successfully. So just be on the lookout. And if you haven't gotten the email, let me know, because I know in the past I've circulated something to the ACEA group, and I can't remember, maybe Mr. Emmett hadn't received it, or maybe it was only really went to me and Scott because of changes. So if you haven't gotten that email, please let me know. And that's all I have.
One small thing to add to that, Richie mentioned that committees and authorities are going back to in-person meetings in September. Just want to reassure you all that because I eventually pick up on things after 20 years of doing this, the second I heard that, I went ahead and reserved meeting rooms through the end of 2003 before everybody else snatched them up, because they are hard to get. So you have to be a little bit ruthless, but we're all set.
I'd also
job.
like to say that I've enjoyed working with you all during COVID. I'm not sure if I will be at next month's meeting, but I definitely will not be at the September meeting in person. And it's been a pleasure to work with all of you.
Thank you, Carolyn, for all your help.
You're very
Thank you.
welcome.
Yes, indeed.
Well, if there's no additional old business, I would ask for a motion for adjournment.
Made.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And carries. Thank you all very much. I apologize for the internet woes. Look forward to meeting in August.
We made